I assume it's much harder than it is to grow good turf grass. And really all it is about being engaged and involved with your yard and making sure you know what it looks like. When it looks good,
All right, welcome to Behind the Turf, episode 17. Today, we're going to be calling this the Summer Lawn Survival Guide. And so basically what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to dive into all these questions that we get over the summer months about lawn care. We're going to try to address all of them, from watering to mowing to disease, just different stresses that are out of our control that the summer provides. I'd like to introduce Jared Koenig, who's back, our agronomist, and our team lead, Ruth Wilkerson.
Hello.
So I'm glad you guys came back. If you've been watching the podcast, we took a little bit of a break, and so I'm excited to have you guys back here. We all have full-time jobs besides podcasting, and so
I was going to say we didn't really leave. We just haven't been here.
Yeah, but a little bit of break, it's good, and so we're refreshed and we're ready. In this episode, we really, I feel like, can just address a bunch of things. And what we'll do is in the comments, because some of these topics we could talk about for a whole podcast, is we'll leave some links in the comments so that you guys can, if you're watching this, you want more information. We've done podcasts on a lot of these topics last year that are great to rewatch if you want to know more specific information. So
if you're the reading type, there's blogs on like all of this stuff too, for the most part.
Jared's you've written a ton of content.
A lot of content.
Edited a bunch of content on our website. So anyway, so let's dive into it so we don't make this a 2-hour podcast. Okay, so I thought we'd start off by, understanding the lawn stresses that come with a lawn. So heat, lack of water, poor mowing practices. I kind of want to dive into all those things, Ruth. In general, though, when we're talking about the summer months, what are the signs of heat stress that clients typically are sending us pictures of?
Yeah, so typically if a lawn has heat stress, there's going to be browning in the lawn. That's the first big sign. And different browning follows specific patterns depending on what you're experiencing. So it's very easy to identify what heat stress looks like, but it looks brown. It just doesn't look great. It's a thirsty little guy, it's a plant, it's a living plant, it needs water. So that's the first sign usually of heat stress.
Yeah, and sometimes,
wilting.
Jared, it shows up like when everything seems great, and all of a sudden it just pops up, the damage, and it's those periods of prolonged heat stress that can be tough on the lawn.
Well, just an example of something smaller, like I have houseplants. They look fine, they look great until one day they just don't. It's wilted leaves, the leaves are falling off. It just happens overnight. And I think the same is true on a larger scale. But
I think that's a great example. Yeah, a lot of times people are, even if they didn't, they remember being around a plant that is wilted at some point. And it's all the same. I mean, plants are plants, right? So it's just a lack of or a loss of turgor pressure and stuff. And, there's one correction for that, which is more water. And I encourage people a lot to become familiar with what their yard looks like in different conditions, because they're used to it looking green. They can even get, unfortunately, used to it looking brown. I mean, especially turf grasses like ours that go dormant in the wintertime. But there's degrees of it too. It'll start off by being a little off colored, and then you'll step on it and your footprints don't, respond as quickly. A healthy turf grass will spring back, whereas a lawn that's lost turgor pressure, your footprints will stay as you walk across the lawn, or the tire tracks when you mow through it'll turn almost like a whitish sheen and then a gray, and eventually it will turn brown. And then most of the time, by the time they get to us to send us pictures, it's already to that point. But we grow very resilient turf grasses here, so there's always redemption.
Yeah, I think it's tough too, because some lawns respond differently than others, and some might pop back faster than others.
And sometimes the spots are isolated. It's not the entire lawn showing the signs. It's just some little spots here and there that are showing signs of drought stress faster than others.
There's actually a term for that.
Oh, Jared, share it with us, please. We want to know.
This is one of those turf terms where it's like it's very obvious. They're called localized dry spots. And I know it's like, that's not nearly as impressive as I made it out to come
so
out.
Anticlimactic.
But yeah, no, to your point, it could be an accumulation of organic matter that's made it unable to take on water, hydrophobic. It could be compaction in spots, could be a lot of things. And then to your point about some yards responding better than others, sometimes it's an accumulation of stress. If there is a bunch of stress over time, the plants just don't have the resiliency and don't have the energy stores to bounce back as quickly as other yards do.
Yeah, and what type of turf you have is a huge factor. Where we primarily are with caring for warm season turfs like Bermuda and Zoysia. A lot of people in Metro Atlanta still have fescues, especially in shady spots. But those shady spots can still be affected by the drought.
Oh yeah, 100%. And they will not recover.
Yeah,
in the same way.
Yeah. But it's out of those 3 turf types, which is primarily what you see in Georgia. I'd say Bermuda's probably responds the best to those difficult dry periods.
Yep. If it's healthy going into being stressed out, I joke around and call it summer dormant because eventually it'll just kind of throw its hands up and say, I don't want to deal with this right now. But yeah, as long as it's in good growing conditions and was healthy before it got stressed out, it'll be fine.
Okay, kind of wrapping this up though, I think the humidity is something that sometimes people will mention to us. Like, do you feel like that makes any difference if it's more humid than other, times of the summer?
Humidity plays a couple of key roles. I don't get too deep into it because there's lots of minutia about humidity in general. But, a lot of it comes down to heat stress. And when people are talking about humidity, it's because they feel hot. Plants can feel hot too. There's a point where they get uncomfortable, even the ones that are really, really adapted well to heat. But, high humidity can be good. It slows down the amount of water that you're losing. It can also be bad because it can contribute to fungal infections. So, there's sort of a not an equal sign one way or the other to good or bad with humidity, other than the fact that if you're hot, they're hot too.
Yeah. So kind of wrapping up this particular section of the podcast, it's like, what are we looking for when people may be experiencing some sort of drought stress, heat-related turf damage? It's really just emphasizing, because the weather here changes so quickly, it's like you got to pay attention. Mm-hmm. You got to be an active participant in your lawn. Mm-hmm. And then when you see something, say something. I know for us, at our company, we have a really great two-way text line with our clients, and so they can send us all day, every day. We're getting different pictures from our clients of what about this, what about that, and so often it's minor, very easy fixes, But in the other cases, they need to make significant changes to prevent damage.
Yeah, and we're on the lawn 9 times a year, and you're on the lawn every day,
right?
So,
well, unless you have kids,
and they're
pulling you to sports and all that kind of stuff,
right. But yeah, you're seeing it
more
to
than
some degree, more than 9 times.
Yeah.
So, paying attention and letting people know, letting us know that something's going on is a really good step in the right direction. And usually there's a solution, and it usually can recover from that. So.
Okay, so let's talk about watering. This is how we prevent it, right? So some of our clients have irrigation systems. I would say probably the majority of them have them. Now, whether or not we're using them correctly is a whole nother issue. So water management is key. Ruth, when you guys are in the office, y'all are that front line, like what kind of tips are you giving clients to kind of get off on the right foot?
So we always tell them that a good starting point is a tuna can. Like if you have a tuna can, put it out and that amount per week. But that's just a base point. Like, again, this is your lawn. It's very individual. It's not a one size fits all. So that's the starting point. You really have to be paying attention. Last year, during the extreme drought stress that we had, 1 inch was not enough. So we really had to encourage clients to do more. And it's always more than what you think it is, which is why doing a visual measurement is such a good idea, because it's usually never enough, whatever you think. And you want to water deeply and infrequently, but that means, every other day. You don't want to be watering back to back, because when you water deeply, those roots are being forced to go deeper into the soil instead of that surface level growth with, root formations on the top of you don't want that. You want the roots to go deeply into the soil. So that's where we start. It's just a good watering practice is the best thing.
And Jared, those first signs, like we were just talking about previously, for clients, they're just like, I don't know, like I've done the tuna can, but like, is there anything that they can be looking for early on to say like, okay, I'm maybe over or underwatering, I guess?
if you know what it looks like healthy, then you know that it's not healthy when you look outside. I had a wonderful meeting with a client the other day who, in a lot of years, her watering practices have probably been sufficient when we were getting regular rainfall. Last year, we had such a sequence of prolonged drought periods that it just simply wasn't enough. But she had parts of her yard that did much better than others, and then she had a couple parts that were just really exposed that really got beat on. And to Ruth's point, it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all solution. But what I will encourage people to do is familiarize yourself with how your yard looks healthy. That's the easiest way to know when it's not healthy. And I think that there is a crossover point for a lot of people where I think that they hope that doing this well is easier than it is. Or there's also sort of this underlying, they assume it's much harder than it is to grow good turf grass. And really all it is about being engaged and involved with your yard and making sure you know what it looks like. When it looks good, it looks good. And so if it starts to look a little odd, well, let's find out why. Sometimes it's as honest as it's just hot and it's a little stressed out, and it doesn't really matter if you're doing all the best stuff. It's going to be a little stressed out for a little while. But a lot of times it's as honest and as simple as we need more water in this zone.
Yeah.
It's a hill, it's southern exposed or something crazy, and it just needs more water.
Yeah. And then Ruth, what happens once we get everybody watering properly? What's going to happen? It's going to start raining.
It's going to start raining.
And we're going to have a 10-year flood. And then what do we got to do?
And then we're going to have overwatering.
Yeah. Turn off your irrigation system.
Turn off the irrigation system. Yeah, you really,
all that hard work goes whoosh,
you really
down the
have
river.
to use your judgment on when rain is coming. And again, we live in Georgia, so it's going to say it's going to rain and it's not, or it's not going to say it's going to rain and it will. And you really have to keep that in mind as you're watering. And overwatering, the results look just like underwatering.
Yeah.
Dead leaf tissue, wilty, brown, sad. So it's just, you gotta,
feels like a swamp when you're walking through
yeah,
it. Like those are all key signs.
Gotta let the lawn dry out between watering. You have to do that, or then you have root rot and you can't come back. You can come back from a dry lawn. You can't come back from root rot.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I cannot get a sponsorship from this company, but I will go ahead and pitch it again. Rachio, it makes a great smart timer. But there's also Rainbird makes a good one. Like there's just all this technology now out there that we did not have 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. We had these little things that hooked onto the side of the house, and they worked for the first season, and then they would break, and people wouldn't get them fixed. But the apps, the technology, it alerts you based off the weather. It's not perfect, but it's a very easy way to, number one, save yourself some money. I mean, there's so many people that could reduce their water bill during those periods of heavy rain that don't, because their irrigation system's running while it's raining, because they have them set for, Jared, like that was my next question. It's like, what time of the day, should we be watering our lawns? It's not when usually we're awake and in the lawn, out active in the landscape.
Yeah, you should schedule it to finish by, 8 or 9 in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, so that way it's good. It has an opportunity to get absorbed, but it's not going to sit there wet forever because the ET rates are getting ready to go up.
So upgrade your controller. It's critical if you really want to improve the lawn, unless you're just very, very on top of the watering. Like it just changes so much in Georgia so fast.
I will encourage though, like even with systems like that, I think they're wonderful and they do such a good job of protecting plant health. I do think that it is important. It's the same as like modern cruise control systems in cars. I mean, like there's cars out there that can almost drive themselves at this point, but you still want to pay attention to the road. I mean, you still want to make sure that like it didn't have a whoops-a-daisy and all of a sudden it's been watering too many days in a row, or, the previous segment that we were talking about that for some reason a valve isn't down and it's not watering at all. All of a sudden you're trusting the system to run, and it may even look like it's been running on the computer, but it's not. It hasn't actually been doing anything. It's just, the cycling hasn't worked the way that you wanted it to. So absolutely. Yep. Those smart systems are incredible, but keep your eyes on the road too. Make sure that you are staying engaged with your landscape. It's the way that you're going to maximize results from a program like ours, or anyone's for that matter.
Yeah. All right. We've addressed the drought issue. Next, I think let's go into weeds, diseases, and pests.
Oh boy.
Oh my.
Oh my.
Jared, so talk to us a little bit about those common weeds. I think maybe a little bit on the ones that are easy to control, that if you're on a good turf program that you really don't have to worry about. But more specifically, the ones that even with a great program, great cultural practices are just still going to pop up and be challenging.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the important sort of misnomers to address is that when you have a good service, you're going to be completely weed free.
Yeah. It's a huge problem in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't blame anybody for wanting that, right? That seems to be sort of this aspirational. I mean, we all grew up, watching movies and stuff where they'd go down these picturesque streets and like everything is flawless kind of deal. And the important thing to keep in mind is that this is, we're operating in the environment. The variables are innumerable. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of things to do. So the goal is as low weed pressure as possible. And there are a lot of species out there that really aren't that bad. Crabgrass gets a bad rap. Everybody texts in pictures and it's always crabgrass. When it doesn't really matter what the grassy weed is. That one's not so bad, for the most part. The pre-emergence, as long as you're on a good program and stuff, do a pretty good job. But that's not to say that on the edges and stuff, you're not going to get some breakthrough. Same is true for, things like prostrate spurge and chamber bitter. They're not awful to get a control of, but they come on so late sometimes during the year that once pre-emergence break down, you might get a little bit of that too around the edges where pre-emergence break down quickly or in a part of the landscape that's harder to keep weeds out of. And that's what, post-emergence are for too. But the goal in general, even for the easy to control stuff, is that the IPM strategy is good. The integrated pest management strategy is good, which water plays a role in, mowing well plays a role in, but also making sure that responsible and ethical use of pre and post-emergent weed control products are used to keep a handle on those things. And then, of course, there's the perennial stuff. That's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, and Ruth, those are the ones your team really has to jump in there. Mm-hmm. It's minor. It's a super easy fix for us to run out there and dig it up. But otherwise, talk to us a little bit about what are you guys telling clients when it comes to a very common, a dallisgrass type situation where we just don't have a product that's going to fully eliminate it.
And the reason for that is because we use selective herbicides, and a lot of people don't realize that. They expect the weeds to yellow immediately. They expect it to kill everything. And we can't do that and keep the grass healthy. So our goal is to keep the grass healthy first and foremost. And we cannot do that and kill some of these weeds immediately. With dallisgrass, the biology is so similar to turf. And so there's not a product industry-wide that can safely take care of that and keep your grass looking great. So we have to just encourage clients to do some work on that. Again, this is a partnership. We're working together. So you can either dig it up or you can go get a selective herbicide, which clients have mixed feelings on, and that's understandable. A non-selective herbicide, I'm sorry. Anyway, something like Roundup, you just put it right in the center of the plant and it will get rid of it pretty fast. So it just depends on the method. If clients are uncomfortable using a non-selective, then they can dig it up, and it really does need to be dealt with, unfortunately, because it will just continue to get worse until it has taken over. They're invasive species. So we do encourage clients to address them as quickly as possible, but we want to help, we want to do everything that we can with all the tools that we have. But integrated pest management means sometimes we need clients to step in and help too. So.
Yeah, it is a partnership.
It is 100% a partnership.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand too, and one of the other things that we find ourselves talking to clients a lot about too for dallisgrass or yellow nutsedge or broom sedge, which is even more fickle, is that the pre-emergence that we're using at the very sort of 10,000 foot view, what they do is they stop root formation. And so as a seed germinates and the very first thing that comes out is that root fiber, that's where they stop. But because a dallisgrass plant already has those roots, they have all of that energy stored underground. Same goes with the nutlets for yellow nutsedge or, insert, tuberous root here, tap root here for some of these biennials and perennials. The reason that even a program as stout as ours and as well-timed as ours can't prevent those is because those roots exist already. But that's great because it's the same reason that we can use those products on your Bermuda grass. Your Bermuda grass and your zoysia and your fescues are perennial plants that have existing root masses. So it's one of those catch-22 things. It's really great that it doesn't hurt those plants because it's why we can use them. It's also a little bit frustrating because there are certain weed species that then are so biologically similar to our plants that we want to have that more extreme measures have to be taken, and they're things that we can't do, but we can certainly advise for.
Yeah, and non-selectives can be good for other things. Like we've talked about clients that have a centipede, which is not as desirable a grass as Bermuda. It's somehow creeped into their lawn. They want to get rid of it. It's an easy way. Like, in fact, I know we did a video last year on that. I think we've got one with dallisgrass too, but I mean, this podcast can have a ton of links in it, but we'll post a link in that too. Again, a good reference on what does that look like. It's very simple, using a very small amount, and actually less is more. You'd rather go back and hit it twice than to do too much. We want to try to do as least amount of damage to the actual turf grass as possible. So let's switch to pest. What are the common signs of pest? To me, I think of two pests that are actually really problems. So we're kind of lucky as far as pests are such a problem in Georgia, but for the Bermudas and zoysias, for the most part, when we're talking about insects, like we don't really have as much of an issue. They're pretty tough. Our turf grasses are pretty resilient to them. Two come to mind. I don't know what you're thinking, but grubs and armyworms.
Yeah.
You got another one?
Yeah. Well, especially for Bermuda and zoysia, I mean, those are the big ones. There's a couple other ones that are, I don't want to incite fear, but there's a couple other ones that entomologists and stuff are kind of watching, billbugs and stuff like that. And, we'll keep our tabs on those, but they're certainly, as far as like widespread pests and stuff are concerned in the landscape, I mean, those are the big ones. And, especially coming off of another year like last year where armyworms were pretty prevalent. Again, I think some people have had armyworms now 2 times in like 3 seasons. 21 was really bad. Last year was not as bad as 21, but it certainly was prolific there for a few weeks. And, it's hard to predict what years are going to be good and bad because of how they work. I don't want to go way down the path on this because we've got content on armyworms. We've got blogs on armyworms, but the other one being white grubs, that's a much more common issue. That's something that happens a lot around here. And, they're root feeders. They're hard to see in real time. Good indicators are things feeding on them, birds, armadillos, things like that. And then in the summertime, they aren't as problematic because at that point they're beetles, Japanese beetles or chafers or mayjunes or whatever beetle they were, that they will become. And in the fall, they go back down in again. But, spongy turf, discolored turf that is, maybe having a hard time staying hydrated, talking about localized dry spots, having a hard time staying hydrated because they don't have as much root mass as they had prior because of the grub feeding. Those are all important. And fortunately, there is unlike most things in this industry, there's a one-shot wonder to take care of both of these things. And, give us a call. Grub control is great. Justin would love to explain it to you.
Yeah.
And we use a Celiprin, which, that's not a trade secret or anything. It just happens to be the best. So shout out to them.
Yeah, and I think, Ruth, maybe you disagree, but I feel like often clients really aren't having that much. They're not really seeing the damage the grubs are doing. It's the armadillos that really.
It's the armadillos.
They're the ones doing the significant damage to their yards, and that's what people are like.
It's usually what people. That's the first indicator for most clients, but it's frustrating because armadillos can feed on a multitude of things. So you can get rid of the grubs, and it doesn't mean the armadillos will no longer show up. But getting rid of the grubs is a good first step because they can be so damaging to turf grass, and so it's a good first step to get rid of those and see where it goes.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Celibrin. It's such a cool product because it doesn't kill those beneficial insects because the ground is just full of great insects that are providing a lot of good things for the soil, right?
Yeah, it's a systemic insecticide. So what it does is it's absorbed by the root mass and then it spreads all throughout the plant. So the nice part about it is even though they do have to feed a little bit before it will hurt them, because it isn't a contact or anything like that, it only is going to hurt things that feed on the turf grass, right? In the instances where we're spraying lawns. And so grubs, they got to eat a little bit, but they're going to be controlled. Armyworms, they have to eat a little bit, but they're going to be controlled. And it really is, we talked earlier about the variables and the challenges for things like weed control, which is, a very important task and very prominent in our minds for the services that we're providing. But as I discussed, there's huge challenges with that. I'll go on record and say that I think in the last I mean, even in the 2 years that we had prolific armyworm, issues, I think there's only been one instance where acelepryn, we've had 100% efficacy other than one instance, and those people had sod installed after we had done the application. And so there was
that
no
shouldn't count.
Right. It's an anomaly. It literally is a statistical anomaly.
Yeah.
If this was science, we'd probably throw it out because it's an anomalous situation where those plants did not have acelepryn in them.
Right.
And so that's, it's hard to put a guarantee on anything when you're dealing with the kind of variables that we deal with. And we do. That's what a service calls and stuff are for. I'll make that clear. We stand behind our service and stuff. So if you're having challenges, please call us. We've probably got a solution for you. But, when it comes to grub control and it comes to, secondary benefits like armyworm control, that product is shockingly good, to the point where there's been competitors come to the market, and Adam and I will sit there and go, we're not going anywhere. This is, and then Ryan would probably you guys have met Ryan before, he's been on the podcast, but he'd probably be like, why are we, no, please don't do that. We're staying with this.
Well, I think kind of recapping on the insect thing before we move past it is like, it's relatively simple. People shouldn't stress about it. It's grubs. Your probably first sign is going to be something digging in your yard. There could be some other signs, but primarily I would say that's the most common. And then armyworms, it's a late summer, some people early fall type problem. And I think a lot of times it happens when people are getting new sod probably. So you or your neighbors getting new sod, just paying attention. And then just that season, listening to the news. Usually if there's a big outbreak, you're hearing it through your neighborhood chats. And then once it's an active problem, just paying attention to your yard. It's basically going to look like someone's come through and scalped your lawn. So if you catch it early, because they like an army, they kind of move across the lawn from wherever they started, right? So in many cases, you can stop them if you can get out there. And we have really tried to, whenever those outbreaks happen, is dedicate trucks to if you call in with the problem, we're out there the next day. If we can't get there the next day because you call too late, we're out there just as quick as we can the following day. So to try to keep it from taking over the whole lawn. But it's just a bad haircut, right?
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever seen one totally kill out a lawn?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, they eat the green materials, but they don't kill the nodes.
Yeah.
They don't eat the plants. They certainly don't affect the roots at all. Armyworms don't. So I've never seen them get to that. I've never seen them create critical injury. But one thing that I would like to bring up here is this is a lot of information in kind of one fell swoop here. And Ruth has mentioned this already too, but we have a group of people in the office that you don't have to have all of this information stored in your head, because they do. And so if you ever have any questions or concerns, call us. Send us a picture. That text line, we've mentioned it. I'll mention it again. A lot of people don't even realize that the line that they get their service notifications from, there's people on the other side of that. And they're in Peachtree City. They're in your area. They live here. We live here. And, we want to help.
We know more about turf grass than we ever thought possible, than we ever wanted to know. A dream come true.
Little did you know when Jared came on the team. You're like, meet Jared. You're like, oh, he seems nice.
So much knowledge.
But, if you're a lot of people, we get comments all the time from people all over the country, and I think it's finding a partner. There are great local lawn care providers.
100%.
Just like us, that are specific to your area of the country. And it's really doing your research and finding that kind of partnership where you can send them pictures and a real person tell you, hey, don't sweat it, or here's a solution, So, okay, so let's move to diseases real quick, touch on that. Okay. Again, I feel like there's just a couple that really come to mind. One for the two primary turf types that we serve. I guess we could talk about fescue briefly too. Yeah. Do y'all want to go back and forth? What's your favorite disease?
Oh, that's such a tough one. I love them so much. Zoysia patch is the best.
And your technical term for that?
Rhizoctonia solani.
Right, thank you. Can you spell that for us?
RHI.
So what do when you're Zoysia patch, I think is probably, to me, the fact you brought that up, that would be my most severe disease issue, because it's just one of those that actually can cause some significant damage to the turf.
Yeah.
Jared, and I think you've done a great job with the team. That's kind of like armyworms. Once we identify it, although we do have a great preventative program, but for the most part, when clients have it, we try to get out there as quick as possible, because we want to address the root cause.
Yeah, pun intended.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. the nice part about rhizog is a fascinating disease. It actually is present in Bermuda grass and fescue as well. It just carries different common names or colloquial names for each of those species, but it can cause a lot of discoloration and some really ugly turf grass. But fortunately, because our zoysia lawns are so resilient, it generally doesn't kill everything if we can get a good hold on it early. It'll spread rapidly. I mean, I remember there was one in Noonan a few years ago. I was actually I was still working on the sort of the operations side of Nature's Turf at the time, and I was out looking at yards, and Ruth sent me a message and said, "Hey, aren't you in Noonan? Can you go look at this?" And I went to this lady's yard, and it was right around the time that the tornadoes had come through there a few years ago and had really like leveled a bunch of really beautiful old trees and stuff. And they'd had some landscaping done. The short version of the story is she had zoysia patch spots I could lay in. I mean, it was crazy. They were gigantic.
That's hard to recover from.
But the nice part was we got her taken care of. I think we started off with a couple of turf disease treatments. I think she ended up signing up for the zoysia patch program, which is meant to, not only is it curative, but it's also preventative. With some time, because it hadn't critically injured it. It had just really made it look bad for a while. We were able to build that density back, and that yard looks great now. Every once in a while, I'll drive by it if I'm near it because I just remember the size of the patches in that front yard, and it looks great. It really does look great.
I hope it's okay to add to, from a customer service perspective, a lot of questions we get are like, why don't you include this in your program? Or why don't you treat for this? And it's because not everybody is going to have this problem. Right. And fungicides are so expensive. We do want to be mindful of our customers. We're all consumers right now, and we understand that not everybody can afford to throw out a fungicide on their lawn. So we do start with the most economical way to take care of your lawn and build from there. We aren't trying to just throw products at you. So if we make a suggestion for a fungicide, listen to it, because we think that that's what's important for you and for your lawn. But we don't include it in the program because then you'd be paying a much more expensive base price for something that you might never have. So,
and a healthy lawn is really the best way to prevent all this that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Best defense is a good offense. Yeah. It's also about being ethical too, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, people are, and the industry in general didn't do itself a lot of favors for a lot of years by just, putting things out sort of flippantly. Kind of deal, and we don't do that. We don't want to do that. We want to address problems that exist. We want to do those things. So if somebody has a yard that is really, maybe they got a low spot that stays really wet, and it's every year they fight the same thing, of course we want to prevent that for them. But then if there's a guy around the corner whose yard is super dry, and they do a good job of managing their water so it's healthy, and they may never have zoysia patch, they may never experience rhizog, and in those instances we simply just don't need to apply those products there because they don't need them. Mm-hmm. So it's responsible for the client. It's environmentally ethical and responsible. Those are very important things for us, as a company from an ethos perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So zoysia patch is one of those things, really, it's just, again, paying attention to the lawn, looking for those kind of discolorations, patches.
They're obvious.
They're usually not the size of Jared. They're usually a little smaller.
Yeah.
But again, just sending a quick picture of that area of the lawn, and we can very easily identify if you've got it or not, and offer a solution. Mm-hmm. Next up for me would be dollar spot.
Yeah.
And even though we've offered this preventative program for zoysia patch for years, and it really was pretty successful from off the cuff. Like our timing, we hit the seasons correctly. Dollar spot's just been a tough one, and I feel like last year really hit a home run with it. I know at my personal house, and I think it was Teresa house out of equally, and some of the other clients that have been on the program, it worked really well. And I think dollar spot's one of those that it's just superficial. It's my experience with it. It doesn't really cause any significant damage. But if you're really into your lawn, you want it to be green, it sure does suck out the green.
It does, yeah.
And I just could not get rid of it for years. And here I am, working at a lawn care company, and like I would get it, and I'd treat it and I'd get it. I treat it and I get it. Mm-hmm. But the preventative program had worked great for me last year. And I think, again, that kind of goes back to what you're saying. It's just like, but not everybody had it every year. I just got lucky. I just got lucky. My lawn is, I'm trying to do everything right, and it's still just dollar spot just plagued me, So it was nice to have a good preventative way to address the issue.
Yeah. A lot of it comes down to, rhizok is a sheath disease. That's right at ground level, and one of the ways that I think I'd like to give, clients that are maybe considering using our services or current clients, some pieces. This isn't something that we just sort of like rest on the laurels of. We're always looking for ways, whether it's, new products coming to market, which doesn't happen as often as we wish it would, or just methodology changing about how we're going to apply these products or how we're going to address these certain challenges and stuff. We're always looking for ways to do better. Fortunately, and I don't mean to sound, self-righteous in this, but we really do a really good job when we've got really good homeowners and property managers and stuff that are taking good care of grass. Our program works wonderfully when it's met with, sort of an equal effort opportunity there. Honestly, it takes more from the homeowner to mow well and to water well than it does for us. But we play a fundamental role in providing that nutrition that for a lot of people will help to stave off or recover really quickly from something like dollar spot if there's a quick outbreak of it. But yeah, I mean, we changed a little bit of the way that we're applying these products, and we've seen great, response from how that has changed the way that we can treat dollar spot. And we're meeting it where it is, and it has played a huge role and something that we're excited to be able to have a more concrete solution for than maybe we felt like we could cure it before, but I feel like we can do it better now.
Yeah, and I think that's just constantly like, the same way that we talk about the environment's always changing, and the clients having to pay attention. It's the same thing for our program. We're constantly evolving the program, trying to make it better. We're taking the information that you guys are gathering on your team. That's passing on to Jared. Jared, you're working with Adam and Ryan, and we're just trying to make the service better as the conditions change.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't say this, because I have so much experience with dollar spot, it basically is about the size of a golf ball, maybe a baseball, and it's just speckled all through your lawn. So you have this nice, beautiful green lawn, and then it's just speckles of kind of a whitish, light brown color throughout it.
It's preceded by little things that look like spider webs, but spider webs have if you've ever. What I like to tell people is around Halloween, you see all like the little spider web decorations and stuff. Spider webs actually do look like that. They've got that sort of very organized appearance to them where the mycelium of dollar spot's very randomized.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll one morning you'll go out and be like, man, look at all them spider webs. Well, look at them. They may not be spider webs. And then eventually the tissue desiccates and you do end up with little spots, silver dollar size spots that are all over the lawn, and they can coalesce. They can get to the point where they can
I've seen that.
They can morph together and connect with one another and stuff. But yeah, fortunately, it's an aesthetic damage for the most part. So getting it cleaned up and then getting the plants past it. I'll say this. I think people probably get annoyed with me, but if it was healthy going in, it'll be healthy coming out.
Yeah.
Especially for like Bermuda and good sunlight and stuff.
And I'd say, Ruth, you get probably a mix of opinions. Once clients realize with dollar spot it's not going to permanently damage the lawn, some people just opt to not treat it, right?
A lot of people do. They just opt to let it go.
Yeah.
And sometimes the fertilizer will flush it out. So they just wait for that round. It just depends. It's really a dollar spot is a client preference because it's not causing permanent damage. So again, another great example of why we don't include it in anything. It's up to the client to kind of decide what they want to do and how they want to handle it.
All right, 20 seconds, Jared. There's two more that come to mind.
20 seconds.
Well, not really summer, though, I guess. I was thinking brown patch was one, but I guess that wouldn't really be. Well, I guess it is. Would you consider that? I guess, yeah.
Well, because fescue gets really weak in the summertime, and that's probably when you're most likely to see it. That is the colloquial name for Rhizoctonia solani and fescue, and so that is what that is.
You write that down.
I did. I wrote it down. I'm actually timing him right now. We're on 30 seconds.
I don't want to spend a ton of time on. I mean, that's basically a very similar type look, though, as for those listening, is the zoysia patch. Would you say
it's the same disease? It's just a different species of turf.
So the look of the turf is going to be basically everything we talked about with zoysia. Again, that is definitely permanent damage. Now, the one thing I would say with that is you're coming up on seeding season, so it's you can reseed the lawn.
Yeah, especially if you get it like late summertime.
Yeah,
it's stressed out. Yeah, that's the kind of the challenge of fescue, but also the benefit of fescue is it's kind of an expectation. You should really be interseeding every year, overseeding every year.
All right, and then there was one more, and then we'll move on to the most important thing. There's one more disease. Let's see if we're thinking the same thing.
Hit me.
No, tell me. What do you think?
I'm worried you're going to say something like Pythium or something.
Spring dead spot.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
well, that's true. I guess I was thinking of things that are curative, like we can cure.
Yeah.
Fairy ring.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some soil-borne pathogens, spring dead spot being one of them, fairy rings if they get to the point where they're like a killing ring. And those are much different challenges than ones that sort of are parasitic and we have treatments for. Yeah.
So anyways, I mean, again, like this is one of those things we can go down a whole nother podcast, but I think the key things for clients to understand, if you're seeing a discoloring in your lawn, go to your local lawn care provider. If you're doing it yourself, take a picture to your local garden center, get them to help you identify whether you have a serious problem or not, and the best solution. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure we hit on before we wrap this up is one of the most important things that we really have to talk about every summer. And really, we're really kicking it off right now, which is mowing. We're going to talk to us a little bit. What are we telling everybody? Everybody calls in. I know we're talking about water, and we already talked about that, but
I beg
mowing.
of you. I beg of you.
Yeah, please.
Please.
Yeah.
It's the easiest thing to do to have a beautiful lawn.
Well, it depends on how hot it is.
Yeah, that's so true. But it's one of two of the easiest things to do to have a beautiful lawn is to mow every week. We have so many people who mow bi-weekly, and that's fine as long as you change your expectations completely, because what happens is you're experiencing mower stress where you're cutting off so much of that plant at one time that it's brown.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of calls of people who think that their lawn is dead after a treatment, and it just so happens they also got a bi-weekly mowing, or it was the third week and they had their lawn mowed and it just really just cut off the color.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's not a permanent, injury.
Yeah.
It's just an injury and it will recover. It's not a problem. But I don't think a lot of people understand that how important mowing is. It's like a haircut. It just helps maintain a healthy lawn. So
Yeah, and I think people just forget, but those blades underneath the mower have to be sharp.
Yeah.
And that's another issue that we probably actually don't even really talk about it enough, is to ask clients. Like if you're having a service done, they're probably sharpening their blades on a regular basis. But if you're doing it yourself and you bought your mower 3 years ago and you've never sharpened the blades, I mean, this can cause real damage.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like going back to the mowing thing, I understand that sometimes you have to make decisions, financially. Like I can't have a mower come every single week.
Right.
That's fine. Just change your expectations
Right.
of what your lawn is going to look like and be okay with it. Your threshold has to change. That's all. That's
Yep.
all that has to happen. It's okay if, it's just, but for the best, if you want the best thing to do, is weekly.
Yeah. It just solves all the problems we're talking about.
Yeah.
Everything, disease, watering, like all those things just are.
Even weed control.
Yeah, weed control.
control, yeah.
It's hard when you get that thatch buildup, which we've got a great podcast. I wrote it down. It's episode 11 on bagging clippings, But, you really, if you're doing it weekly, you don't even have to do that. It's just extra effort. That
You shouldn't bag clippings if you're
Right.
mowing every week.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just it's just information people just don't understand. They think they always should bag, but you really don't need to if you're doing it weekly.
What the goal is, and this is true for anything in turf grass, not only are we looking to sort of prioritize turf health, because that's our job, right? We're looking to put out the appropriate amount of nutrition. We do it at the appropriate time. But what it comes down to from a maintenance perspective, and that goes for mowing and watering, is making sure that you're reducing the amount of injury that the turf has to sustain. Because every time it's hurt, it knows that it needs those leaves, so it's going to expend as much energy as it can as it is required, all the way to the point where they may run out of it eventually, to replace those leaf tissues because they know they need them.
Right. And it's the exact thing when we have people call in who say my neighbor's lawn looks different than mine.
Right.
It can come down to something as simple as their watering and mowing practices, which, generally I have no idea what those are when I'm talking to somebody, but it just can come down to something as simple as that change, just weekly mowing, regular watering.
Yeah. And whenever I think of that, I always think of you, Jared. Like that was probably, I feel like we still talk about this, your hardest transition from managing a golf course where you literally had control over everything that you possibly could with a lawn, right? To coming to on the residential side where you really have just one little slice of the puzzle or the pie, and everything else you've got to count on your partner, whether that's the mowing service, the client, property manager, to handle the rest.
Yeah.
You know,
As a person who is a helper by nature, though, and likes to try to help and educate people, when we get a really receptive client, somebody that really is, they know, especially people that are kind of in the know, they're really, some of my favorite clients through time have been people that are really, really into this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're fascinating to talk to. And I love, it fills my cup to explain things to people at whatever level they would desire that I explain it to them at.
All right, what did we miss? Did we survive the summer?
I think we covered summer,
Yeah.
the growing season.
The TLDR of this is our core program and good mowing practices and good watering practices are, I mean, that'll get you 80 to 90% the way there. Maybe even farther than that if you're doing them well, 95%. It's hard to get all the way to 100 without going out there and picking the worst weeds yourself and all that stuff. But, you know, there is also innumerable variables, and we're here to help with those things. So that's the short version, is take care of the base stuff. But if you ever see anything weird, call us, text us. We'll help.
And I'll probably answer the phone. You get me.
I mean, or any
Hopefully
of
on a good
our,
day.
On a good day.
or honestly, any one of your, we talk about, that's the other thing is we're talking about the support team like it's a giant group of people. It's you and four
Four
very
other people.
passionate people that are very good at this.
Who really care.
And they want to help you.
Yeah.
They really do.
So I just wrapping up, it's just quick bullet points, which is key factors: watering, right? Got to water properly, not too much, not too little, but we've given some really good ways of gauging that. Mowing is so important. And then to me, really, number 3 is just paying attention, because there's all these other little variables. You probably won't get any of them, but if you're paying attention to your lawn, you'll know. And if you've got a good resource, whether it's the local garden center or a provider like us to go to and get those answers. Because if you're not looking at it every day, it's really easy for us to sit here and be like, oh, it just looks like little specks all throughout your lawn. Well, you know, that could happen. That could be misinterpreted, you know? So having a good resource is important. If y'all don't have anything else, we'll wrap it up. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate y'all coming back in. You know, when these guys took this job, I did not mention anything about a podcast or being on social media. And so I really appreciate you guys coming in, sharing your knowledge and experience. Ruth, in particular, I love how much real insight you were able to bring to the podcast. And for those of you listening, I know I mentioned it several times, we're going to definitely post some links for additional information on a lot of the topics because we went over so much today. But in general, we really appreciate just the feedback, whether it's clients who called in. It really encouraged, I think, all of us to get back in here and do another podcast. But even the comments from all over the country, it's kind of crazy. You think of social media and people can watch stuff all over, but when someone comments from Maine, it's like, oh, that's cool. Someone's watching our podcast from Maine. And so it makes you feel good. It makes you want to get back in here. And, the knowledge that you guys, or we've all experienced over the last decade, 2 decades for me, it's fun to share that information and see someone really benefit from it.
We had the guy, my specialty in golf was bent grass golf greens. And we had a guy that was trying to put a golf green in his yard or something, asking us questions on YouTube. I mean, it's the craziest stuff sometimes. But
Jared, please come to my office. I need help with this. This is way outside my scope. Anyways, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, leave us some more additional comments. If we've missed something that you've got a question for, we are looking to answer those questions. If I can't answer it, I'm going to ask Jared to answer it. If Jared can't answer it, we're going to find out for you and try to post it as quick as possible. Again, thanks for tuning in to Behind the Turf.